Hi everyone. Just wanted to take a few minutes just to talk about really what's new within this kind of crucial pillar of Zero Trust. And as Pete's explained in the last half hour or so, this is really at the heart of securing the hybrid working environment because I think Pete touched on it. No longer are we within, the traditional perimeter. In fact, in Microsoft, we like to say identity is the new perimeter, which is quite a buzz phrase, but I think also quite true, because where your identity kind of follows you around, while you're not tied to specific hardware or specific locations. So securing that identity is really critical now to making sure that when people are working from anywhere, no one's infiltrating that identity or getting permissions that they shouldn't have. So the biggest kind of development in this space that we've had for quite some time is our product called CloudKnox, which is a permissions management platform. It's an acquisition that Microsoft made last summer. So July last year, we acquired CloudKnox. We've spent the time since then developing it and integrating it with the rest of our identity suite of products as well. So while it's already available in the US, for example, it's going to be launched here in Europe in July. And the reason for the slight discrepancy in dates in terms of where it's been launched geographically was we had to make sure it was fully compliant with GDPR regulations. So we're now at that point and we'll be releasing it in Europe in probably the next 6 to 8 weeks. So look out for the dates on that. But in terms of what CloudKnox can bring, it's basically looking at identity governance and looking at what identities you're using and what identities are accessing, particularly in the cloud environments. So as you'll see as we go through the next few slides, you can do a bit of a discovery piece, first of all, with CloudKnox to basically let it see which identities your resources and users have access to across all of your cloud environments, not just Azure. Basically do a bit of an audit of what's there when it comes to identity and what those resources have access to, and then do some automatic remediation to really implement that least privilege access. Because as we talked about in some of the earlier slides, if people have excessive privileges when it comes to hybrid working, that's only going to present even more risk, because if bad actors get hold of that identity and can infiltrate that, they're only going to be able to access even more than they would have done in a more traditional perimeter-based environment. And unifying that cloud access policy is really key, because again, as we move to hybrid working, not only are people working from different devices, they're also accessing applications that could be anywhere, whether that's on-prem in your company's data centers or spread across multiple public clouds. So again, makes that challenge of keeping track of identities and who's accessing what even more of an issue. So by being able to have CloudKnox there, you can have one place to look at your cloud access policies and then manage that across the different cloud environments that you're working with. So if we jump to the next slide, please. So a kind of sample here of what you can get from CloudKnox. So as I mentioned, a good place to start with CloudKnox is essentially just making it do a bit of an audit, a bit of a discovery without actually turning on any restrictions or any remediations. And this is just one example of what you could see from CloudKnox when you turn on one of its risk assessments. So you can see there, a common finding is that more than 90% of identities are using less than 5% of the permissions granted to them. So clearly that opens up a massive risk if you're not on top of that. And that tends to happen just over time. People's identities are used for different purposes. Sometimes we find CloudKnox can actually pick up a lot of identities of people who've left the organization or contractors who are no longer working on projects, but no one's kind of gone round to tidying up those identities on the back of them. And also, I think when it comes to things like doing this work, people are often afraid to sort of turn something off in case they break something or stop someone doing their job. But by having this automated assessment, you can instantly see whether those identities are being used against all of those permissions that have been granted to them. You can get down to some quite granular details of how long ago certain permissions were used, how often certain permissions are used, which enables you as a security admin to make some, really quite powerful decisions as to whether you really do need that level of access for those users and resources as well. So that first sort of row there is really one of the key benefits that customers have seen from CloudKnox, that easy ability to look at identities, what the permissions are, and just whether those identities are really using those permissions and therefore being able to scale them back as well. So that also, sort of looking at the third row there, that lack of separation of duties, we do see that quite a lot in organisations. Again, users with excessive roles and policies, particularly in the development field as well. So a lot of the times developers have been given permissions to do a certain piece of work, a piece of code. Again, after that deployment's gone live, no one's gone back to tidy that up and restrict those permissions again. So really, really key to that audit and compliance piece in particular, doing that sweep of your identities and what do they actually need to do their job now. And then not only are we interested in human user identities, also workload identities as well. So identities can also be resources like applications. You can immediately see what those applications are talking to, what permissions have been granted to those applications to talk across clouds, for example. And again, doing that sort of audit of that and seeing, do they really need that? Was that something that was done for a point in time? How can we restrict that now to make sure that that's not used as a point of infiltration in this hybrid working mode, when it can be a lot easier for attackers to intercept and potentially do something on the back of an application being accessed? Okay, so next slide, please. So a couple of the use cases for CloudKnox as we look at different teams within an organisation. So clearly the security team is going to be very interested in this as a tool that they can use, because a lot of the work that we can do with CloudKnox can save a lot of manual time as well. So being able to do that, accessing identities, whether they're user identities, admin identities, or application identities, getting that picture of what permissions those have is incredibly powerful. And being able to really see, you know, as it says there, even, you know, what machines are doing, what they're talking to, what they're accessing, can give you a very, very powerful picture of what rights you've granted across the board and where that could be potentially scaled back as well. And then, you know, being able to detect and respond to security anomalies, because when you get this picture of your identities, you can also do a baseline of what is normal activity as well. So get that snapshot, get that picture, and then going forward, CloudKnox will basically flag up something that looks like an anomaly from a particular identity that may be trying to access resources that you wouldn't expect it to access, or maybe trying to access resources across into another public cloud that you wouldn't expect that resource to be accessing. So you can immediately see from this platform where something might have gone wrong and where an identity might have been infiltrated by one of the bad actors as well. And then from an assessment and remediation monitoring point of view, this can be very powerful from an audit and compliance standpoint as well. So as well as some of the other Microsoft compliance tools, this is an excellent addition that can feed into things like not only compliance of what identities are doing, but also from a cloud compliance point of view as well, you know, where are your identities talking to across platforms? So being able to do that automatically, and you will get things like recommendations to remediate those identities as well, that again, through a few clicks, you can push out those remediations and improve things like compliance scores as well. So next slide, please. So from a cloud point of view, this tool has been very, very popular from a cloud infrastructure point of view. And when you see things like CloudKnox out and categorized by people at Gartner, it usually falls into the domain of cloud security, because it can be so incredibly powerful in determining just what is going on in that cloud environment from an identity and access point of view. So again, you know, because the cloud can be by its very nature more open and perhaps less in control than you would be on-prem, there's a lot of monitoring tools there across the infrastructure, particularly for those environments that contain sensitive data. Again, we kind of touched on that earlier with the amount of data and the sort of labeling that you can do. You can immediately apply policies through CloudKnox to have a closer look at anything that's deemed particularly sensitive data, where it might be residing. You know, again, if any identities are trying to kind of move data out with geographical boundaries, which might go against certain regulations, CloudKnox will flag that and can automatically stop it if you choose to enable that as well. Okay, next slide, please. And then finally, the identity and access management team, again, clearly core to what we've been talking about today with securing, you know, hybrid working environments. You really do want to look at least privilege policy here. You know, as Pete touched on earlier, it really is, you know, absolutely imperative when you're not protected by more traditional perimeters to really think of identity as being that perimeter. And part of that is making identity as secure as possible. So least privilege access is something that we've spoken about for a long time, but it's become even more prevalent and important as people are moving around and working from different devices and different locations. And using that automatic sort of sweep of identities within CloudKnox, and being able to automatically sort of flag up where people might have more privileges than they need, might not be using privileges that have been granted to them some time ago, and being able to do that sort of lockdown really just through a matter of, you know, a few clicks without a lot of the kind of manual intervention or endless consultancy hours that were sometimes needed to clean up the identity space. All of that would be handled automatically within CloudKnox. And again, you know, being able to manage that life cycle across all identities. So trying to simplify the new joiners and leavers to organisations as well. CloudKnox can give you that picture of when an identity was last used, can immediately flag if someone appears to be no longer working in that team or that role anymore, enables you very easily to get that snapshot and do something about it if there's identities there that are not being used or have been overprivileged for the purpose.